Welcome to Identifying Effective Discussion Questions, How to Recognize Relevant, High Quality, and Impactful Questions that will engage your students. Knowledge construction is a social dialogic process. In online learning environments, this type of meaning-making is accomplished primarily through discussions designed to engage students in the process of articulating, reflecting on, and negotiating their understandings of course content. However, research shows that the quality of discussions is directly related to the quality of the questions being asked. A poorly constructed discussion question will generate low-level thinking and poor responses. Likewise, a well-constructed discussion question will foster critical thinking and high levels of participation. One of the key elements of the online courses at Hallmark University is discussion questions. Research shows that active learning activities such as discussions can increase student learning and engagement. In addition, discussion questions enable students and instructors to contribute to the community of inquiry through their social engagement. This course will teach you how to identify the characteristics of effective discussion questions so that you're better able to engage with students and foster increased learning. In this lesson, you will learn about the following topics: identifying objectives, identifying the characteristics of an effective discussion question, and distinguish between effective and ineffective discussion questions. In this section, Identifying Learning Objectives, you will explore two sections. Identify the level of Bloom's taxonomy, where, after completing this section, you will be able to, given a Bloom's taxonomy handout, identify what level on Bloom's taxonomy an objective belongs to every time, and determine objective alignment with discussion question. After completing this section, you will be able to, given an example of an effective discussion question, determine which objective aligns with the discussion question every time. One of the most important aspects of an effective discussion question is the learning objective. Without an indicator of what a student is going to be able to do, know, or value at the end of a lesson, it is difficult for the student to make the connections between what they are learning and on what they are being assessed. In this section, you will be able to, given a Bloom's taxonomy handout, identify what level on Bloom's taxonomy an objective belongs to every time. Bloom's taxonomy was created in 1956 by Benjamin Bloom as a way to classify cognitive skills by complexity. Each level corresponds to different objectives and activities with varying levels of difficulty. Imagine you're working with an instructional designer to determine which objectives correspond to which levels of Bloom's taxonomy so you can align learning activities to accompany them. On your Bloom's taxonomy handout, you see the different levels, their corresponding verbs, and the types of activities that correspond with each level of Bloom's. At the most basic level is remember. Remembering, which is the act of recalling information, is considered the lowest order of cognitive processing, and yet recall-type questions are the most frequently posed by educators. Example objectives you might see at the remember level are asking students to identify parts of the human skeleton. Questions aimed at eliciting a student's understanding of the material are those that ask the learner to provide examples, classify items, summarize information, and/or draw inferences. At the understand level, students might be asked to summarize the plot of a story. Application questions require the learner to execute a procedure or process, mental or physical, to an unfamiliar situation or circumstance. At the apply level, students might be asked to use a formula to solve a problem or interview a subject matter expert. Analysis requires the learner to break down the material into constituent parts and determine the interrelationships among them. Analysis questions may ask the learner to organize elements within a structure, distinguish relevant from irrelevant information, or deconstruct underlying values and biases. Moving into higher order thinking skills, at the analyze level, students might be asked to compare one concept with another. Evaluation requires formulating judgments based on standards or existing criteria. Evaluating questions require the learner to critique a work or product, determine the appropriateness of a process or product for a given problem, or examine the inconsistencies in a theory. At the evaluate level, students may be asked to critique a peer's writing sample. Finally, creating is considered the most difficult task in terms of cognitive processing. Questions that address this cognitive domain may require learners to generate alternative hypotheses based on observed phenomena, devise a new procedure to accomplish a task, or conceptualize a new product. At the create level, a student may be asked to write a poetry journal. Review your Bloom's Taxonomy handout as we go through this next section. In this example, the objective, identify the objective that aligns with the discussion question, belongs in the remember level. You will find the verb identify in the remember column of your handout. In this example, the objective, match each Bloom's level with its correct position on the pyramid, belongs in the understand level. You will find the verb match in the understand column of your handout. In this example, the objective, use the Bloom Taxonomy handout to determine on what level of Bloom's Taxonomy an objective belongs. The objective belongs in the apply level. You will find the verb use in the apply column of your handout. In this example, analyze the impact of instructor engagement in an online discussion. The objective belongs in the analyze level. You will find the verb analyze in the analyze column of your handout. In this example, critique a discussion question for effectiveness. The objective belongs in the evaluate level. You will find the verb critique in the evaluate column of your handout. And finally, in this example, write an effective learning objective. The objective belongs in the create level. You will find the verb write in the create column of your handout. Using your handout, which level of Bloom's taxonomy do you think this objective would belong to? Identify 3 characteristics of an effective discussion question. This objective belongs to the remember level of Bloom's taxonomy. The remember level of Bloom's taxonomy asks students to retrieve relevant information from long-term memory. In this example, the objective is in a higher level of Bloom's taxonomy. Using your worksheet, at what level do you think this objective belongs? This objective belongs to the analyze level of Bloom's taxonomy. The analyze level of Bloom's taxonomy asks students to break materials into their constituent parts and determine how the parts are related to each other and to an overall structure. For this assessment, use your Bloom's taxonomy handout to match the objectives on the left with the Bloom's taxonomy level on the right. Do your answers look like this? List the levels of Bloom's taxonomy, belongs in the remember level. Design a project workflow, belongs in the create level. Contrast teaching online with teaching on ground, belongs in the analyze level. And distinguish between effective and ineffective discussion question, belongs in the apply level. In this section, you will be able to, given an example of an effective discussion question, determine which objective aligns with the discussion question every time. Have you ever taken a class where the instructor tells you you're going to learn one thing, then teaches you something else, and gives you an exam that has nothing to do with anything you learned? Learning objectives are a way to structure, sequence, and plan what students will be able to do, know, or value at the end of an instructional sequence. Graded activities, then, are the ways that students are able to demonstrate what they learned and what the learning objective stated. It is important that the learning objective and the graded activity, in this case the discussion question, are aligned so that what the learning objective says the student will be able to do, know, or value at the end of the learning sequence is actually what they will be asked to demonstrate. When determining alignment between an objective and a discussion question, it is important to consider what the objective is asking the student to do. For instance, if an objective is asking a student to identify something, typically they would demonstrate that by completing a multiple choice quiz. Identify does not lend itself well to a discussion question. On the other hand, a verb like explain or describe would imply that a student will need to articulate something in writing or verbally. Likewise, verbs like analyze and critique are often used to assess a student's ability to articulate their understanding of a concept. As you review the learning objective, consider what the verb is asking the student to demonstrate and evaluate whether the demonstration lends itself well to a discussion. Using your handout, consider the following discussion question. Sanjay is a first-term student in business. He has never had a job before and doesn't see how HCG is relevant to him in his professional or academic life. What would you say to Sanjay to help him understand the benefits and the process of HCG? Respond to peers. Review your peers' answers and respond with suggestions for how they could improve their responses. Support your suggestions with references from the readings and videos from the week. Which objective best describes what the student is being asked to do in the discussion question? Identify characteristics of HCG. Explain the process of HCG over the lifespan of your academic program. Analyze the benefits of HCG to your professional life. Or articulate the performance standards for an HCG consultant. We already know that identify does not lend itself well to discussion questions. The other three objectives have verbs that do lend themselves well to discussion: explain, analyze, and articulate. However, only two of them are relevant to the entire discussion prompt. The most appropriate learning objectives for this are explain the process of HCG over the lifespan of an academic program and analyze the benefits of HCG to professional life. Using your handout, consider the following discussion question. Please read the information in Week 4 lecture and notes. There are 4 articles titled Hinduism, Timeline of India, The History of India Part 1, Ancient Time, and Buddhism, and 2 presentations titled Overview of Polytheism and Overview of Monotheism. Pick one of the 4 items to be reviewed and answer the following 3 questions. Which topic did you choose to focus on for this online discussion? Why did this topic catch your attention? And what piece of information struck you as the most interesting and why? Response to peers. Review your peers' post, choose someone who wrote about something different than the type of religion you did, and compare the 2 religions and discuss the commonalities between the 2 religions. Which objective best describes what the student is being asked to do in the discussion question? Compare the commonalities in polytheistic and monotheistic religions. Identify characteristics of different religions. Explain Buddhism, or analyze the origins of different religions. We already know that identify does not lend itself well to discussion questions. The other 3 objectives have verbs that do lend themselves well to discussion: explain, analyze, and compare. However, only one of them is relevant to the entire discussion prompt. In this example, compare the commonalities in polytheistic and monotheistic religions would be the most appropriate objective for the discussion question on the right. The following discussion question is in a capstone business course. It is offered both on-ground and online. Students in this course are all business majors in the middle of their degree program. Find a current article from an online news organization that interests you, for example, economics, business, politics, no older than 1 week. Summarize the article, give the who, what, where, when, why, and include your opinion of the topic. Generate 3 questions you believe the article left unanswered and cite your sources in APA format. Respond to peers. Do you agree with your peers' opinion of the topic? Explain. Conduct additional research into the topic your peers chose and answer with their 3 questions. Cite your sources. The objectives listed are the objectives for this lesson. Which objective is the most appropriate for this discussion question? Formulate constructive peer feedback. Summarize information relating to a current event. Support a position with factual research, or apply teamwork and problem-solving skills. Using your Bloom's Taxonomy handout, you can see that 3 of the objectives have verbs that might lend themselves well to discussion questions: summarize, formulate, and support. However, further reading of the discussion prompt reveals that the objective most closely aligns with what students are being asked to do is summarize information relating to a current event. In the same capstone business course, identify the objective that most closely aligns with the discussion question for this lesson. Which of the objectives do you think most closely matches this discussion question? Create a propaganda message for a world issue, formulate constructive peer feedback, apply teamwork and problem-solving skills, or reflect on goals and learning about global business issues. Using your Bloom's Taxonomy handout, you can see that all of the objectives can be used as discussion questions. However, further review of the discussion prompt reveals that the first objective most closely aligns with the discussion. The following scenario is an upper-level business course on organizational behavior. All students are in their final stages of their degree. The course is offered both on-ground and online. The average enrollment is 13. Review the objectives for the lesson on the left and identify the objective that best aligns with the discussion question on the right. Take a few minutes to read the discussion. Which of the objectives best aligns with the discussion question? Explain how organizational behavior impacts both personal and organizational success. Identify the basic management functions and essential skills that comprise the management process and relate them to organizational behavior. Or describe the role of organizational behavior in managing for effectiveness and discuss the role of research in organizational behavior. Using your Bloom's Taxonomy handout, you can see that only two of the objectives listed lend themselves well to a discussion of any kind: explain and describe. Of those two, only the first objective most accurately aligns with the discussion question. Discussion questions are a key part of every course. In order for a discussion to be effective, it must contain certain characteristics. In this section, you will learn the key characteristics to consider when identifying an effective discussion question. Describe audience characteristics. In this section, given a scenario, you will be able to describe audience characteristics, including knowledge, skills, and attitudes for students in a college-level class. Align objectives with discussion. In this section, given a scenario of a college-level course, you will be able to identify the learning objectives that align with the discussion question at every time. Identify question type. In this section, given an example of a discussion question, you will be able to identify the type of discussion question every time. Analyze a discussion prompt for quality. In this section, given an example of a discussion prompt, you will be able to analyze it and describe at least two characteristics of quality that are present or missing based on the university standards for effective discussion questions. Evaluate a discussion question for relevance. In this section, given an example scenario and discussion prompt, you will be able to evaluate the discussion for relevance to the student and to the content being taught based on university standards for effective discussions. Evaluate for student-to-student engagement. In this section, given an example discussion prompt, you will be able to evaluate the level of opportunity for student-to-student engagement in the discussion based on the university standards for effective discussions. Knowing who your audience is will help you be a better communicator. The same is true with discussion questions. Taking the time to gain an understanding of the knowledge, skills, and attitudes of your students will enable you to engage with them more fully. Given a scenario, you will be able to describe audience characteristics including knowledge, skills, and attitudes for students in a college-level class. It's 9 days before the term starts and you're getting ready for your students. You're thinking about students who are going to be taking your class. Some of them you may already know, but some of them are new to you. What are some of the things you think about as you consider your students? Part of what makes a discussion question effective is making sure you know your audience. Taking time to consider the characteristics of your learners will ensure that the discussion question is appropriate, relevant, and rigorous enough for your students. Imagine you're scheduled to teach a section of HSAS 1301, Hallmark Strategies for Academic Success this term. The course is a general education requirement. It has recently been redesigned in collaboration with an instructional designer, and this is the first term with the new design. The course has 7 discussion questions in it. You will have 30 students in your class. What kinds of things should you consider about your students before they arrive? Knowledge. The first thing to consider is what knowledge the students may bring with them as they come into class. In an upper level course, for instance, students may bring knowledge from prior courses. In a first term course like HSAS 1301, students may have a much more varied knowledge and skills. Skills. What kind of skills will the students have when they come into class? Will they be able to use a computer? Will they know how to write a sentence? Are there any physical requirements that they need to be able to fulfill, like watching videos or listening to recordings? Attitudes. What might the students be feeling as they start this new class? Consider the range of attitudes of your students from excitement to anxiety to apathy. As we consider our students, some of the things we might add to our list of knowledge they bring into the classroom are: they have a wide range of knowledge. Some students are coming in right out of high school. Others are returning from a long break. Others are veterans. Others are retirees. While they are all first-term students, the life knowledge they bring is varied. Understanding what knowledge students bring into the classroom will help you identify effective discussion questions that are relevant and rigorous. Some of the skills your students will most likely have coming into your class based on their entry testing are basic math skills and basic writing skills. In order to be successful, it's necessary for them to have basic computer skills. Some other things to keep in mind are whether or not they will need to be physically able to view videos and listen to audio presentations. Understanding what skills your students bring to the classroom will help you identify engaging discussion questions that are relevant and appropriate. The attitudes your students have when they enter this course may be as varied as the types of students. Some may be excited to begin this new journey. Others may be anxious to be coming back to school after such a long time. Still others may be apathetic or resentful that they need to take this non-credit course. Understanding the attitudes that your students bring to the class will help you identify discussion questions that are relevant, appropriate, and engaging. Now you try. Use the following scenario to inform your description of the student characteristics for your online class. Write a short description of your student audience, including information about their subject matter knowledge, skills, and attitudes for students in an online college-level ethics course. You're teaching an 8th term online level ethics course titled Contemporary Moral Issues at our university. Enrollment is 25 students. The course is a general education requirement. It has recently been redesigned in collaboration with an instructional designer, and this is the first term with the new design. Review the course description and write out your characteristics and traits for the students. What are some of the knowledge characteristics you identified? Do they look similar to the ones here? In this case, an effective discussion question might take advantage of the opportunity to ask students to apply their life experiences to new concepts from the reading and analyze how different character traits might impact their ethical decision-making. What are some of the skills characteristics you identified? Do they look similar to the ones here? Another example of an effective discussion question might take advantage of the opportunity to ask students to view a video or listen to a podcast and respond to it with an analysis of their views in APA format. What are some of the attitude characteristics you identified? Do they look similar to the ones here? Another example of an effective discussion question might take advantage of the opportunity to ask students to engage with one another about their life experiences and opinions. Use the following scenario to inform your description of the student characteristics for your on-ground class. In a Word document, write a short description of your student audience, including information about their subject matter knowledge, skills, and attitudes for students in an on-ground college-level English course. Submit your document to Blackboard when you've completed the assignment. Earlier, we learned that learning objectives are a way to structure, sequence, and plan what students will be able to do, know, or value at the end of an instructional sequence. Graded activities, then, are the way that students are able to demonstrate that they learned what the learning objective stated. Online discussion questions should buttress the overall course purpose while advancing specific learning objectives. It's important that the learning objective and the graded activity, in this case the discussion question, are aligned so that what the learning objective says students will be able to do, know, or value at the end of the learning sequence is actually what they'll be asked to demonstrate. In this section, given a scenario of a college-level course, you will be able to identify the learning objectives that align with the discussion question every time. One way to identify the characteristics of an effective discussion is by using the discussion question checklist. It contains the major categories of characteristics you should consider when evaluating a discussion question for effectiveness: learning objective alignment, type of question, prompt quality, and student-to-student engagement. At this point, you're ready to determine whether the learning objective is aligned with the discussion question, the first item on the checklist. This discussion question appears in an undergraduate business course. The lesson covers professional communication. Review the discussion question and identify which of the lesson objectives most closely aligns with the discussion. Which of the lesson objectives most closely aligns with the discussion? Critically analyze a topic for your research paper and create an outline. Communicate a professional message using email. Critically analyze a topic for your research project and professional career. Or articulate the importance of dependability in your professional and personal development. While all of the objectives have verbs that lend themselves well to discussion questions, only one closely aligns with the discussion question. Articulate the importance of dependability in your personal and professional development. Andrew's writing a discussion question about the character trait integrity. He wants his students to think about how this character trait relates to their personal and professional lives. Which objective best describes the outcome he is looking for? Describe the character trait integrity. Explain the character trait integrity and how it fits into your personal life. Analyze how integrity relates to your personal and professional life. Or analyze integrity in its relationship to other character traits in your life. While all of the objectives contain verbs that lend themselves well to discussion questions, only one is aligned with the topic Andrew wishes to have his students discuss. Analyze how integrity relates to your personal and professional life. Review the discussion question from a business leadership lesson and identify which objective most closely aligns with the discussion. Which objective most closely aligns with the discussion? Introduce the fundamentals of global strategic management. Consider the phenomenon of globalization and the implications on business. Reframe a personal or professional goal-oriented endeavor the student has witnessed or experienced with consideration to the role strategy and leadership played in its conclusion. In this case, the most appropriate objective is reframe a personal or professional goal-oriented endeavor the student has witnessed or experienced with consideration to the role strategy and leadership played in its conclusion. In the discussion question, underlined in green, you can see where the question articulates the elements of this objective. Review the following discussion question from an undergraduate business course covering cross-cultural communication and determine which, if any, objectives align with the discussion. Which, if any, objectives align with the discussion? Analyze practices of cross-cultural etiquette within global business communication. Compare and contrast international etiquette rules with those of the United States. Describe various international business etiquette procedures, or none of the above. Although analyze, compare and contrast, and describe are all verbs that lend themselves well to discussion questions, none of them are reflected in the discussion prompt. In fact, a more appropriate objective might be, describe a time when you violated etiquette norms or experienced a violation of etiquette norms due to a lack of knowledge of another's culture. In this case, the answer is none of the above. Imagine you're leading a class in a discussion and you have had just asked a question. After the first student responds with the answer, no one else chimes in. It's just dead air. Or, in your online class, you see the same answer from all your students. What happened? It could be the type of question that you asked. In this section, given an example of a discussion question, you will be able to identify the type of question every time. Using questions to teach is an age-old practice that has been a cornerstone of education for centuries. Questions are often used to stimulate the recall of prior knowledge, promote comprehension, and build critical thinking skills. Teachers ask questions to help students uncover what has been learned, to comprehensively explore the subject matter, and to generate discussion and peer-to-peer interaction. Burge suggests questions should target concepts and principles even as they encourage skill development. They should be content-based, open-ended, and constructed to reveal comprehension while inducing critical thinking. Depending on the type of question you ask, you will yield different results. For instance, if you ask closed or objective questions, your students will have limited options for responses. The answers are narrowed down to a list of the best answers. Usually closed-ended or objective questions are looking for factual information. You will find that most closed-ended objective questions fall within the lower levels of Bloom's taxonomy. Open-ended or subjective questions, on the other hand, allow for many original responses from students. They elicit diverse perspectives and encourage a dialogue between students. Typically, open-ended, subjective questions fall within the higher levels of Bloom's taxonomy. One way to identify the characteristics of an effective discussion is by using the discussion question checklist. It contains the major categories of characteristics you should consider when evaluating a discussion question for effectiveness. At this point, you're ready to determine whether the discussion question is open-ended or closed-ended, the second item on the checklist. Review the following examples. What 9 changes have been made to the Hippocratic Oath? And which of the 9 changes to the Hippocratic Oath do you feel have made the most impact on the practice of medicine? As you can see, the closed-ended question only allows for 9 answers. Once those 9 answers have been provided, there's nowhere else for the conversation to proceed. In addition, a question like this falls within the remember level of Bloom's taxonomy. The open-ended question, on the other hand, asks students to analyze which of the changes has made the most impact. There are multiple opportunities for students to generate an original answer and to interact with one another. The question itself falls in the analyze level of Bloom's taxonomy. Review the 3 discussion prompts and determine whether they are open-ended or closed-ended. All 3 discussion prompts are closed-ended. Review the 3 discussion prompts and determine whether they are open-ended or closed-ended. The first prompt is closed-ended, and the second 2 prompts are open-ended. Determine whether this question below is open-ended or closed-ended. The discussion question is closed-ended. It does not allow for an original answer. There are limited possibilities to answer the question. Once the initial question has been answered, there's no reason for other students to respond and carry the conversation forward. You've just received your term page and are reviewing the discussion questions prior to teaching. You've verified that the objectives align with the discussion questions. You've determined that the questions are open-ended and allow students to create original responses. How then will you determine if the discussion questions are quality discussions that will foster engagement? At the end of this section, given an example of a discussion prompt, you will be able to analyze it and describe at least 2 characteristics of quality that are present or missing based on the university standards for effective discussion questions. According to Maddox, the design of a course should include discussion questions that facilitate student dialogue and engagement. Discussion questions should include open-ended questions that encourage critical and creative thinking. They should be written in such a way that they encourage social interaction and community building. They focus on higher levels of cognition in Bloom's taxonomy, and the response to peers offers guidance to students about how to respond to move the conversation forward. One way to review the course for quality is to refer to the discussion question checklist. It contains the major categories of characteristics you should consider when evaluating a discussion question for effectiveness. At this point, you are ready to analyze the discussion prompt for quality, the third item on the checklist. The following discussion question appears in a 4th-term philosophy course titled Contemporary Moral Issues. This week's lesson is about ethical relativism. Analyze this prompt for quality using the effective discussion checklist. This question is missing some characteristics of quality. First, the objective does not align with the discussion question. The initial question is closed-ended, requiring a yes or no answer. The objective might be more appropriately expressed as describe the reasons to support ethical realism. The discussion prompt is on the lower level of Bloom's taxonomy, and there is no response to peers' guidance to carry the conversation forward. Review the following discussion for quality using the effective discussion checklist. The following discussion appears in an upper-level ethics course. The discussion question does not have a learning objective aligned with it. While the questions are open-ended, they are low on the Bloom's taxonomy and do not encourage critical thinking. The response to peers' guidelines for carrying the conversation forward are missing. This is not a quality discussion. The following discussion question appears in a first-term English class in a lesson about emphatic writing skills. Review the discussion using the checklist and identify at least 2 ways this discussion meets quality standards. The learning objective and the discussion question are aligned. The discussion prompt is open-ended and allows diverse responses. The prompt is on the higher level of Bloom's taxonomy. And the response to peers guides students on how to respond. Imagine you're getting ready to teach the HSAS 1301 Hallmark Strategies for Academic Success course. You already have an idea of who your student audience is, first-term students, varied backgrounds, range of emotions from excitement to apathy. You're reviewing the discussion questions in preparation for teaching the online class. What are some of the things you should look for to ensure the students will respond to these questions? At the end of this section, given an example scenario and discussion prompt, you will be able to evaluate the discussion for relevance to the student and to the content being taught based on the university standards for effective discussions. Research shows that students prefer to interact with authentic and relevant content. In a discussion question, that may take the form of case studies, real-world applications, and personal insights. Relevance to content means that the discussion question relates to the learning objective, the supporting material, and the lesson topic. A discussion is effective when students are able to connect what they are learning to what they are discussing and ideally tie it into their personal experiences. To examine a discussion question for relevance, first you need to consider the audience. In this example, the HSAS 1301 course, the audience is first-term students from a variety of backgrounds with a variety of attitudes and skills. Next, you need to consider what lesson the discussion will appear in. Next, review the learning objectives for lesson and identify which learning objective aligns with the discussion question. While there are 3 verbs that could lend themselves well to a discussion question, describe, and compose, only one of them aligns with the discussion question. Describe different strategies for addressing obstacles to graduation. Upon review of the course description and lesson title, Departmental Support, this discussion question is relevant to the topic. Thinking about the student audience and their needs, this discussion question is relevant and will allow them to incorporate personal experiences into their responses. You are teaching the HSAS 1301 course. The course description and lesson description are listed on the right. What is the first thing you should consider when determining relevance? Given the following discussion question for the leadership lesson, which of the objectives on the left best aligns with the question? Describe your leadership style, illustrate time management and organization skills, Identify your leadership style, or compose basic information for resume. Describe your leadership style is the objective that best aligns with the discussion question. Finally, given the audience makeup, lesson title, leadership, objective, and discussion question, is this question relevant? Yes, this question is relevant. You're teaching the HSAS 1301 course. What is the first step you must perform in order to determine whether a discussion question is relevant or not? Check for objective alignment, look for case studies or personal stories, ensure there is topic alignment, or analyze audience makeup. Analyze audience makeup. In the HSAS course, the discussion question is appropriate for this audience. Given the lesson topic stress management and study habits, which learning objective aligns with the discussion question? Identify individual learning style. Define how you are a servant. Identify areas of your life where you demonstrate servant traits. Illustrate time management and organization skills, or explain the importance of stress management, various ways to manage stress, and what methods you will employ to manage stress while in school. The objective that best aligns with this discussion question is explain the importance of stress management, various ways to manage stress, and what methods you will employ to manage stress while in school. Finally, given the audience makeup, lesson title, objective, and discussion question, this question is relevant. Have you ever had a discussion in your course where it was so quiet that you could hear crickets? Or worse yet, the responses you got ranged from 2 syllables to 2 sentences? One important aspect of online learning is online discussion and interaction. The ability to discuss and exchange ideas adds value to an online course. The success of online courses is dependent on the quality of online interactions in the discussion forums. In fact, online discussion forums are the most important place where learning can happen. But when a discussion question is not constructed effectively, it can discourage students from participating to their fullest. In this section, given an example discussion prompt, you will be able to evaluate the level of opportunity for student-to-student engagement in the discussion based on the university standards for effective discussions. An effective discussion question contains not only the initial prompt, but the opportunity for students to respond to one another. Typically, the second element of the discussion appears in the response to peers section of the discussion. This invitation to respond to peers is more than simply a request to respond to 2 other students. It is an explicit instruction for how to respond to other students. One way to review the course for student-to-student engagement is to refer to the discussion question checklist. It contains some major categories or characteristics you should consider when evaluating a discussion question for effectiveness. At this point, you are ready to evaluate the prompt for opportunity for student-to-student engagement, the final item on the checklist. Consider the following discussion question. Does this discussion encourage student-to-student engagement? The discussion question does not encourage student-to-student interaction. It contains only the first prompt. There's no response to peers prompt guiding students how they should respond to the other students. There's no reason for responding students to participate in the discussion. Review the discussion question and evaluate whether this question provides opportunities for student-to-student interaction according to university standards for effective discussions. The discussion question encourages student-to-student interaction. It contains both the initial prompt and the response to peers prompt. The response to peers prompt guides students how they should respond to the other students. Students have a reason to participate fully in the discussion. Review the discussion question and evaluate whether this question provides opportunities for student-to-student interaction according to university standards for effective discussions. The discussion question does not encourage student-to-student interaction. It contains only the first prompt. There's no response to peers prompt guiding students how they should respond to other students. There's no reason for responding students to participate in the discussion. Review the discussion question and evaluate whether this question provides opportunities for student-to-student interaction according to university standards for effective discussions. The discussion question does not encourage student-to-student interaction. It contains only the first prompt. There is no response to peers prompt guiding students how they should respond to other students. There is no reason for responding students to participate in this discussion. Now that you've learned how to analyze learner audience, align objectives, identify question types, evaluate discussion quality, and analyze a discussion for student-to-student interaction, you know how to determine the difference between an effective and an ineffective discussion question. After completing this lesson, given a discussion question, faculty will be able to distinguish between effective and ineffective discussion questions every time using the university standards for effective discussions as a guide. Using the effective discussion checklist, review the discussion question and determine whether it is an effective or an ineffective discussion. According to the checklist, this question is not effective. The prompt is at a lower level of Bloom's taxonomy. There's no response to peers prompt guiding students how to respond. There is no indication that students are supposed to respond to one another. Review the following discussion question and use the checklist to determine whether this question is effective or ineffective. Following the checklist, this discussion question does not have objective alignment. The type of question is open-ended. There are multiple opportunities for responses and the question elicits diverse perspectives. In addition, the variety of responses encourages dialogue between the students. Reviewing the discussion prompt, it's difficult to determine what level the prompt should be on Bloom's taxonomy simply by looking at the objective, since the objective and the prompt are misaligned. However, reading through the prompt, it's evident that the prompt is asking students to compare and contrast information which, according to your Bloom's taxonomy handout, falls in the analyze level, a higher order thinking skill. Looking further, you can see that the prompt has a response to peers section that offers guidance to other students in how to respond. Finally, the question is relevant to students and to the lesson topic. This discussion question encourages student-to-student engagement through open-ended nature of the question, the quality of the prompt itself, which encourages higher-order thinking, the relevance of the question to students and to the lesson, and through the response to peers prompt that offers guidance to the other students in how to answer. The only thing missing from this discussion in order to make it truly effective is objective alignment. One way to solve that issue is to revisit the objective and align it to the discussion question more closely. For instance, in this case, the objective could be rewritten to say, compare and contrast how cultural relativism meets or fails to meet the demands of the minimal conception of morality. Using the effective discussion checklist, review the following discussion. This discussion is not effective. The learning objective is not aligned with the discussion. The initial question in the prompt is closed-ended, asking an either-or question. The question is lower on Bloom's taxonomy. There is not a response to peers prompt guiding students how to respond to one another, and the prompt does not engage or encourage student-to-student interaction. Review the discussion question and determine if it's effective. This question is not effective. There is no learning objective to align. The question is closed-ended, and while there is a response to peers section, it does not offer guidance to the students about how to respond. This question does not encourage student-to-student interaction. Although it is not apparent what objective is supposed to be, the question appears to be low on Bloom's taxonomy.